Hello, students. Welcome to the nervous system. This one is going to be a little deep, except in the same time, it's going to be incredibly superficial as to the amount of content that I actually go into. The nervous system, as you may know, is one of the more complex systems when it comes to the human body, which means that there's a lot of different types of things that are going on, and it also means that a lot of the words that are associated with the nervous system are going to be all over the place. They're going to range from what's going on in the individual neurons themselves to different things that could go wrong with them to the actual structures of the nervous system and how they actually work. Now, the biggest problem with the structures of the nervous system is that the vast majority of them are named after people, which means that you get really awkward names for things because it's about the person and the pronunciation of that person and their nationality rather than the actual structure and function of things, which makes it a little bit more difficult. But let's go in and figure out what we can help with. When you're looking at the overall anatomy and physiology of the nervous system is broken up into two big chunks. We have the central nervous system, which includes the brain and the spinal cord. And then we have the peripheral nervous system, which is a network of neurons that go from the central nervous system to the periphery. Periphery meaning the outside. So when you're thinking about the way that I can even talk, the way that I can move my fingers, the way that you can do a variety of these different things, it's going to be that combination of the central nervous system to the peripheral nervous system. And that peripheral nervous system is going to include things like the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves that are going to go from the spine outward. And there's 12 cranial nerves, and we can go through all of those if you really want to. And then there's also 31 pairs of spinal nerves. I say pairs because you're bilateral, which means you have one for each side. Now, you've heard me say neurons and nerves. Neurons and nerves are not actually the same thing, really. Neurons are the individual cells, so they are the cells that make up a nerve. Nerves are like a bigger structure. So if you end up thinking about it, it's the difference between the things that make up whatever it is and the actual thing itself. So neurons are those nerve cells, and they are the structural and functional component of a nervous system. We can go into some of the actual physical structures of a neuron, but I really don't want to end up going too deep into that. There's a lot of different flavors of neuron, so you can have a number of different ways that they look and interact, and that's going to end up change where they are in the body and what they actually do in the body. Neuroglia, it is literally, there is a space between the neuro and glia. It's not neuroglia. It's neuroglia are supporting cells. So there's a variety of them, and they're going to have different names depending on whether they're in the central nervous system or in the peripheral nervous system. Nerve fibers and tracts are the types of things that are going to go from one area to another, and they're either called nerve fibers or tracts. So you'll end up seeing things described as tracts when they end up following a specific route to get from one place to another. The central nervous system, as I said before, makes up the brain and the spinal cord, and this is going to be dealing with essentially taking the information from the outside of the body and making it make sense. How does it deal with that information? Ouch, I hit something hot. What is my body's response? To move away. That needs to go from peripheral system, ouch, I touched something hot, to central nervous system. What does touching something hot mean? To back to peripheral nervous system. Pull my hand away. That's a simple reflex, but it still goes peripheral, central, peripheral. Spinal cord is going to be where a bunch of these things are going to come together. It also serves as a reflex center for things like what I was just talking about that links the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The cranial nerves provide sensory and motor input for a number of base responses. So things like your optic nerve, which let you see, your vestibulocochlear nerve, which helps with balance and hearing, your olfactory nerve, your oculomotor nerve, which helps with eye movement, but more so in the changing your pupil and other things like that. There's a variety of other nerves that also deal with eye movement in a number of ways. With taste sensation, that's your facial and your glossopharyngeal. Your vagus nerve deals with the barfing reflex, amongst a variety of other things. So you can go through all of those. There's a lot of really interesting mnemonics that go along with the cranial nerves. Some of them are incredibly dirty. Some of them are fairly offensive. Some of them are relatively clean. So I'd suggest looking for a couple of those, and they might help you remember them, either for this class or for other future classes. The autonomic nervous system is bodily function control. So you can think of the autonomic nervous system as how does your body deal with all of these different types of things and make it so that you can keep on living. And that generally breaks down into, and by generally I mean always, the autonomic nervous system is broken down into the sympathetic division, or the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, and the parasympathetic division, which is rest and digest. Those are the monikers that they tend to get. It doesn't necessarily mean that sympathetic is always going to be the stimulation, but generally that's what it does. Adrenaline or epinephrine and norepinephrine are the things that are associated with sympathetic. Parasympathetic is more of that calming down type of stuff. So that's how those work. When we're talking about nerve cells, nerves are made up of nerve cells themselves and neuroglia, or just glia. With a neuron, you have the soma, which is the body, which if you end up going down to the main floor of U Square, you'll see that there's a store that sells intimate apparel, lingerie, and that type of stuff. And it is called soma because it covers your body. So soma means body. It's the same root as somatic and a variety of other things that we've ended up talking about. So soma is the body of the neuron. There's a nucleus inside. It has dendrites that come off. Dendrites you'll see in a variety of other different types of places. It means branches. You have one big dendrite, which is called the axon. At the root base of the neuron, you have what's called the axon hillock, and it's the beginning point of the axon. You have myelin sheaths and nodes in between. Sometimes those are called the nodes of Ranvier, or nodes of Ranvier, if you don't want to actually be French. It is technically Ranvier, but those are around the myelin. So neuroglia are going to be support cells. They help provide a variety of different types of things to neurons to make it so that neurons can live. Neurons can also avoid damage or a number of aspects like that. Within the central nervous system, those are called oligodendrocytes. Within the peripheral nervous system, they're generally called neurolemmacytes. So two different names for two different places. The brain lives inside of the skull. There's a number of layers that go between skull and brain, and those can be broken into a variety of different types of things. Dura matter, arachnoid matter, and pia matter. There's a number of other levels within that. So the dura matter, arachnoid matter, and pia matter are called the meninges. So if you have some sort of meningitis, that is what is getting inflammation, those meninges, which is why it's so dangerous, because then you can have swelling around the brain, which makes it so that the brain doesn't have anywhere to move. There are grooves and valleys around the brain, gyri and sulci, or a gyrus and a sulcus. So those are those different parts, the bumps on the brain. The brain is broken up into two different hemispheres, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. There's some things, so the basal nuclei are the caudate nucleus, the putamen, and the globus pallidus. The limbic system is made up of the hippocampus and the amygdala. Amygdala, not amygdala. Cerebellum is at the base of the brain. The brain stem has a variety of different parts, the midbrain, pons, and the medulla oblongata. The diencephalon has the thalamus and hypothalamus. There are these things inside that help make cerebrospinal fluid, which are called the ventricles. And there's actually 4 different ventricles, and they all have different types of roles to allow cerebrospinal fluid to move around. You can break up the brain into a variety of parts: cerebrum, the parietal lobe, occipital lobe, temporal lobe, cerebellum, and then pons, medulla oblongata, and the spinal cord. Different brain areas have different functions, and you can see those on these. You'll see a lot of abbreviations in this section, which makes it so that it's a little bit difficult. Some of these abbreviations have to do with diseases. Some of these abbreviations have to do with issues. Some of these abbreviations have to do with things that you would potentially measure, like intracranial pressure, lumbar pressure, etc., and so forth. Some of these are going to have to do with neurotransmitters, like acetylcholine, or units of measure, centimeter and milliliter, ways of measuring things, MRI, which is magnetic resonance imaging. These are all going to come together to create a broader idea of what you're actually looking at in one area or another. And here's more of these different types of things. When you're working through this, once again, if you have any types of questions, concerns, problems, issues, just reach out and ask me any type of question. Please, I'm here to help you.